Hello, my name is Kate Wagner, Reading Interventionist with Read Learning Services. Today I'm going to discuss some strategies for spelling that you can use with your student with reading and spelling difficulties, and it encourages your student to pay particular attention to phonemic awareness. Let's get started. So in order to show you these strategies, I'd like to model them using my document camera. And you may see my document camera right here. I'll zoom out just a bit so you can get my paper. So when you're working with your student who has reading or writing difficulties, it's best practice to use a multisensory approach to spelling. In which case, your student will need to use both hands in order to efficiently use the strategies that I'm going to teach you today. So, we're going to begin by giving a prompt to your student who is spelling single syllable words. Okay? So, when your student has a sentence that they want to or need to spell, start by having your student say that sentence out loud. This will build your student's auditory memory and get them thinking about the specific sounds in each word. For example, the draft by the bench is grand. So now that I said it out loud, I can begin spelling. The first word is a sight word, so I simply just have to write that word. Sight words are those words that we simply have to memorize because they don't follow our regular phonetic patterns. I'm saying it out loud, and so should your student. Now, I'm getting to a word that I will have to employ a multisensory strategy to make sure I get all the sounds in the right spots. So I'm going to take my non-writing hand and tap out each sound starting from left and moving to right in reading order. Draft. D, a, f, t. The draft. Okay, so I have more to go, but I want to show you a couple other strategies as we move forward. So pay attention that when I get to the word bench, I am going to use a vowel keyword to help cue me in and make sure I'm using the correct vowel for the sound that I want. The draft by the bench is grand. The draft by the bench. B, e, eddy, n, ch. Is g, apple n, d. Oop, I just ran myself out of room. All right. So you'll notice that I used two different keywords, and I used these keywords to solidify and reinforce the correct vowel for the sound I wanted. So I used a keyword here for the vowel E, and I used a keyword here for the vowel A. These keywords would be pre-taught with your student in a systematic way using whatever program that your student is using at that moment. The last step to spelling is reading the sentence exactly how it's written to make sure everything is how the student wants it to be and all the right sounds are in the right spot. Often I notice that students will read the sentence how they think it ought to be, but they're not looking specifically at what they wrote down. So make sure you're cueing your student into every sound that they wrote on the page. Here we go. The, d, a, f, t, draft by the b, e, n, ch, bench is g, a, n, d. Grand, grand. Last but certainly not least, let's make sure I have both a capital letter and punctuation at the end of my sentence. Now this may seem tedious, but recognize that these strategies will come quicker and quicker to your student, and eventually they may build some automaticity as they get more consistent with their phonemic awareness. Now that your student has demonstrated proficiency with spelling one-syllable words using the touch and say method demonstrated earlier, now you can move on to working with your student on splitting up multi-syllable words within sentences. At this point, your student should be feeling comfortable with one-syllable words, splitting them on individual digits, and there will be a new technique for multi-syllable words. Let me demonstrate what that looks like. Just as before, I'm going to give an example sentence after I demonstrate the technique with a single word. In multi-syllable division, we're still splitting words up using reading order, going from left to right, but instead of using individual digits, as we had with the touch and say method in one-syllable words, we're going to use our whole hand to tap and say. So I'll show you what that looks like with an individual word. Let's say we have the word music. I would say the word music, and then I would tap out the entire word, splitting each syllable with a single tap on my desktop. Mu-sick. Next, it's important to repeat the tapping technique and spell each syllable in isolation. Mu, sick. I want to point out a couple of things that are handy when I'm working with students. The first thing is I encourage students to leave a little extra space between syllables as they're beginning this technique. This not only allows them to see the syllable division clearly, but it also allows them to add any additional letters, such as doubling rule letters, as they need to. The second thing I'm going to point out is that if a student is struggling with individual sounds in a syllable, it may still happen. They can go back to the touch and say technique within one syllable before tapping the next syllable. That strategy is still in their toolbox and still available to be used if they need it. Next thing I'm going to do is show you how to incorporate this into writing a sentence. Now, one-syllable words will generally be generalized at this point, and your student shouldn't have to use individual tap and say, touch and say technique when they're doing this. Now, they can pull it back in if they need to, but they shouldn't have to do it with every one-syllable word. So, I'm going to suppose I have the sentence, the children will discuss the tennis match. All right, with sight words, again, I'm just going to say and write the word. The, I have a multi-syllable word, children, chill, dren, will, discuss, discuss, dis, cuss, the, tennis, tennis, te, nis, match. Oops, that last one I didn't really have to tap. I want you to notice a couple of things here. those sight words I just said and I spelled, along with some of the easy one-syllable words. There are a couple words that incorporated some different rules that hopefully your student is learning in tandem with multisyllable division. These are some doubling rules, and there are a couple of ways your student could approach these rules. Some of my students don't like to interrupt their thought process, and they struggle incorporating the rules as they're writing from the beginning. So what I typically tell those students is spell all the words you can here, and then when you're going back to check your sentence, you can add those additional letters, such as discuss, the double S, and tennis, the double N. The last thing I always tell my students to do is to read through their sentence, checking for spelling and sounds, but also checking to make sure that they've followed all of their syllable division rules and the rules that are dependent upon syllable division. So I'm going to model that right now. The, chill, dren, will, discuss, the, tennis, match. Checking for punctuation and capitalization, and that looks just about right. That is it. So it is a tap and say technique rather than a touch and say technique for multisyllable words, and it's pretty straightforward as long as your student knows how to divide words into syllables, can feel the rhythm of dividing words into syllables, and can incorporate their syllable dependent rules. That's all I have for you today. Happy teaching.